Imagine investing your life savings or your company's capital in a machine that promises to be your ally on the road. But instead of profits, what you find is a dead end of expensive repair shops, phantom spare parts, and a value that plummets faster than an engine without oil. The market is full of traps disguised as opportunities. Today, in a list you won't want your mechanic to see, we reveal the 12 truck makes and models that are technically, financially, or commercially bankrupt. If you see any of these at a used car lot, run in the opposite direction. We start with number 12. Number 12, Sterling Actera. The story of the Sterling Actera is a textbook example of how to disappear without a trace. Born from the merger of the remains of the old Ford heavy truck and Freightliner's Sterling business line, the Actera was introduced as a medium and heavy-duty truck, a direct competitor to the International and Ford of the time. It had a boxy, functional look and at its heart beat fairly conventional Cummins or Detroit diesel engines. The problem was never its initial design, but its death sentence. When Daimler, owner of Freightliner, and therefore Sterling, decided in 2009 to shut down the brand for good, it didn't just stop producing trucks. It began a slow and agonizing process of dismantling its support network. Buying an Actera today is like buying a ghost. It means acquiring a vehicle whose corporate existence has been erased. There is no official support from the manufacturer. There are no Sterling technical support hotlines. Service manuals have become collector's items. The real hell, however, is in the spare parts. Although it shares some components with other Freightliners of the era, the Actera had a significant number of exclusive parts. Moldings, cab elements, electrical modules, brackets, air conditioning systems. When one of these components fails, an epic hunt begins. It's not like looking for a spare part for a Freightliner Century, which was produced by the millions. It's navigating remote junkyards, abandoned internet forums, and small workshops that just might have a rusty part on a dusty shelf. The cost of this search is not only monetary, it's time-consuming. Your truck can sit idle for weeks or months, waiting for a brake pedal, window handle, or instrument cluster to turn up. The Actera is the embodiment of death by neglect. It's not inherently bad, but the world has moved on without it, and dragging it into the present is a titanic, costly, and in most cases, economically irrational task. It's first on our list because its biggest flaw is absence. The absence of support, of a future, and of common sense for anyone who decides to take a chance on it. Number 11, Ford Cargo. The Ford Cargo is an icon. In many countries, especially in Europe and Latin America, it defined what a rigid distribution truck was for decades. Its low-entry cab, perceived robustness, and the prestige of the blue oval made it a bestseller. But time and mileage have not been kind to the generations prior to the comprehensive redesign of the 2000s and 10s. Buying an old Cargo, especially those from the 1990s and early 2000s, is like opening a Pandora's box full of electrical gremlins and chronic suspension problems. The electrical problems are legendary. The cargo trucks of that era suffered from wiring that over the years seems to develop a mind of its own. Connectors rust, insulation cracks, and circuits begin to behave erratically. Lights come on by themselves, indicators flash for no reason, intermittent faults in the injectors or sensors leave the driver and mechanic in a perpetual guessing game. Diagnosing these faults requires the patience of a saint and a specialist electrician, who is now an endangered species. It's not a problem that always leaves you stranded, but it's number 11, Ford Cargo. The Ford Cargo is an icon. In many countries, especially in Europe and Latin America, it defined what a rigid distribution truck was for decades. Its low-entry cab, perceived robustness, and the prestige of the blue oval made it a bestseller. But time and mileage have not been kind to the generations prior to the comprehensive redesign of the 2000s and 10s. Buying an old Cargo, especially those from the 1990s and early 2000s, is like opening a Pandora's box full of electrical gremlins and chronic suspension problems. The electrical problems are legendary. The cargo trucks of that era suffered from wiring that over the years seems to develop a mind of its own. Connectors rust, insulation cracks, and circuits begin to behave erratically. Lights come on by themselves, indicators flash for no reason, intermittent faults in the injectors or sensors leave the driver and mechanic in a perpetual guessing game. Diagnosing these faults requires... Number 10, Marmon. To talk about the Marmon of the 1990s is to talk about a legend, a truck that was built almost by hand, with a quality of materials and a level of customization that rivaled luxury cars. They were the machines of choice for the most successful owner-operators, those who wanted something unique, oversized, and with a presence on the road that made the asphalt tremble. A well-maintained Marmon from that era is a work of art on wheels. And therein lies the problem. Well-maintained is a concept that, for a Marmon, comes at a price that can exceed that of a new mid-range truck. The Marmon's nightmare is one of extreme specialization. Virtually nothing on that truck was standard. It shared almost no components with other brands. The chassis, cab, electronics, interiors, everything was Marmon. When the company was absorbed and its production faded away, the supply chain for replacement parts dried up almost completely. There is no catalogue at the auto parts store. There are no generic replicas. Needing a simple steering seal, a specific rear-view mirror, an instrument panel, or, God forbid, a structural part of the cab becomes an odyssey. There are 3 options, and they are all bad. First, search a scrapyard specializing in Marmons, where prices are stratospheric because the part is irreplaceable. Second, try to get a heavy machinery workshop to manufacture the part to order, with the engineering and unit manufacturing costs that this entails. Third, cannibalize another Marmon, perpetuating the cycle. As a daily work tool, an old Marmon is a white elephant. Its sentimental and aesthetic value is inversely proportional to its economic viability. Every kilometer traveled is a gamble, because any breakdown, no matter how small, can mean weeks of downtime and a bill with 4, 5, or 6 zeros. It is the perfect truck for a museum or a multimillionaire collector with his own workshop. For anyone else, it's a sure ticket to bankruptcy, a beautiful and useless machine that will remind you every day of the difference between a truck and a mobile sculpture with an engine. Number 9. Western Star 4900. Before Western Star reinvented itself as a luxury brand within the Daimler Group with the 5,700 and 6,900 models, there was the legend. The Western Star 4900 and its siblings from the 1980s and 1990s were custom-built trucks with a level of craftsmanship and mechanical complexity that made them unique. They were the Cadillacs of the road, but with the mechanics of an ocean liner. And that is precisely why they are a nightmare in today's real world. The complexity of an old Western Star 4900 is overwhelming. It was not uncommon for these trucks to have redundant pneumatic systems for brakes and suspension, labyrinthine electrical schematics with dedicated relays and fuses for each function, and engines so customized that the service manual was a unique document for each chassis. The philosophy was, if you can imagine it, we built it. The result, decades later, is an impossible puzzle for any mechanic who isn't an elderly master who worked at the original factory. Repair costs aren't high, they're stratospheric. A simple problem in the sophisticated cabin air conditioning system, which was often a high-end aftermarket unit installed at the factory, may require the manufacture of a special hose or the search for an obsolete compressor. A leak in the intricate brake air system can mean dismantling half the cab to access a line buried in the chassis. And because many components were custom-made or from suppliers that no longer exist, the solution is often a handcrafted adaptation, with the resulting loss of reliability and the risk of affecting other interconnected systems. Owning one of these classic Western Stars is like owning an old private jet. The initial purchase may seem like a bargain, but the hangar, workshop, the specialized mechanic at a premium price, and the spare parts, made to order, will ruin you in record time. It's a star that stopped shining for a reason. Its light was too expensive to maintain. For the driver looking for a truck, not a life project, the old 4900 is a direct path to financial despair. Number 8. Cinetruk or FAW in non-native markets. The temptation is powerful, almost irresistible. A new or nearly new truck at half or a third of the price of an equivalent Volvo, Scania or Freightliner. Brands such as Cinetruk, FAW, Shackman or Dongfeng offer this promise in markets in Africa, Latin America, and even some corners of Eastern Europe. The mirage of the low initial price, however, hides a desert of problems that emerges as soon as the truck leaves the dealership. The fundamental problem is not always the initial quality, which has improved, but the entire ecosystem, or rather, the lack thereof. Buying a truck is not buying a product, it is buying access to a network. A network of skilled service, spare parts available within a reasonable time frame, technical support from the manufacturer, and a resale value that does not evaporate like smoke. These brands, outside their domestic Chinese market, lack all of that. The service network is often sparse and poorly trained. A local repair shop may dare to change an oil filter, but when a problem arises with the exhaust after-treatment system, very complex in modern engines, with the engine electronics, or with the transmission, they simply do not have the diagnostic tools, knowledge, or spare parts. The truck becomes an expensive ornament. Spare parts can take months to arrive if they arrive at all, shipped from China in sea containers. There is no market for alternative or generic spare parts. And then there is the resale value, or lack thereof. A truck is an asset, and part of its financing is based on the fact that you will be able to sell it in a few years to help pay for the next one. A 5-year-old Sinatruck in a non-Chinese market has a residual value close to zero. No one wants it, because everyone knows the story. You're stuck with an asset that depreciates rapidly and is impossible to liquidate. The low initial price is in reality a full price. You pay for everything up front, including the future inability to sell it and the costs of endless breakdowns with no quick fix. It's a slow, sure, and total ruin. Number 7. International TerraStar. International Trucks, a name with a huge legacy, made a major miscalculation with the TerraStar. Launched in the early 2000s, it was a Class 4/5 service truck designed to compete with the Ford F650 and Freightliner M2. Its selling point was a mid-sized international diesel engine and an Allison automatic transmission, all wrapped up in a distinctive cab. But the TerraStar was born with a manufacturing defect that International never knew how to or didn't want to fully resolve: chronic and catastrophic problems with its transmission. The specific Allison transmission model used, and its integration with the vehicle's engine and software, was a disaster. Owners and fleets reported premature failures, jerky shifts, power loss, and in too many cases, complete transmission destruction with less than 100,000 kilometers. Independent Allison repair shops began to recognize the model as a frequent and costly customer. International released software revisions and service campaigns, but for many units the problem seemed intrinsic to the design. The real sin, however, was abandonment. International, seeing low sales and a sea of complaints, decided to simply kill the TerraStar. It discontinued it without a clear successor, leaving owners with a truck that had a reputation as a mechanical time bomb and now with the stigma of being an orphan model. Getting specific support became difficult. Technicians specializing in the model were few and far between, and the factory's willingness to fix problems under warranty quickly evaporated. Buying a TerraStar today is buying the remnants of a failed experiment. You are very likely getting a truck whose most expensive and critical component, the transmission, has a high probability of failing catastrophically. And when it does fail, you will find that the solution is neither easy nor cheap, and that the manufacturer who conceived it washed its hands of the matter years ago. It's the ultimate pattern of a bad purchase: a known defect, abandonment by the manufacturer, and a repair cost that exceeds the value of the vehicle. A dead end on wheels. If you think those are bad, get ready. Now we're entering the realm of true nightmares on wheels. The next 6 aren't just bad buys, they're financial black holes that have driven entire fleets into bankruptcy. Here's the worst of the worst. Number 6. Freightliner Argosy. In a North American market obsessed with long-hooded trucks, the Freightliner Argosy was a rare bird, a modern beefy cabover designed for applications where overall length was critical, such as road trains in Australia or certain special transports. However, its fate was sealed by indifference. When Daimler decided to withdraw it from the market, it did so not with a final hurrah, but with an administrative silence that has become its life sentence. The Argosy is not just a discontinued truck. It is a truck that its own parent company completely renounced. Official support evaporated. There is no technical support line, no service updates, and the manuals are digital relics in obsolete formats. But the real hell, again, is in the parts. The Argosy shared its engine and transmission with other Freightliners, but its cab, specific chassis, and all body and assembly components were unique. A door, a windshield, an instrument panel, the cab's climate control system. Each of these items is a museum piece. The junkyards that once had an Argosy already tore it apart years ago, and what's left is either rotten or has already been sold at a premium price. The cost of bodywork repairs after a minor incident is astronomical because it involves an almost archaeological search for parts and then their installation by a workshop that has probably never seen an Argosy in its life. The truck becomes a prison from which you cannot escape. You cannot use it for fear of damaging it, and you cannot sell it because no one in their right mind would buy it. It is a monument to incompatibility, an engineering dead end that Freightliner preferred to forget. And if the manufacturer forgot it, what hope can a private owner have? Zero support means zero future. It is a ghost ship, sailing without a captain or port, waiting for the final shipwreck. Number 5. Russian trucks, KAMAZ MAZ. Temptation may come in the form of an irresistible offer, a nearly new KAMAZ 8x8, a seemingly indestructible beast at a price that seems like a steal. For someone who needs a truck for a difficult job, the siren song is powerful. But importing a Russian truck into a Western market, Europe, America, is one of the most catastrophic mistakes you can make. It's not a question of quality, it's a problem of total ecosystem incompatibility. First, the regulations. A KAMAZ or MAZ is designed to comply with Russian standards, which are significantly more permissive in terms of emissions, passive safety and noise than Euro or EPA standards. Legalizing it for road use may be impossible. It does not have the necessary exhaust after-treatment systems, type approval records or safety certifications. It is an illegal object on wheels before you even start it up. Second, spare parts. The supply chain is non-existent outside the post-Soviet sphere of influence. A fuel filter, a sensor, an axle seal, parts that are ubiquitous for a Western truck require an order to Minsk or Moscow for a KAMAZ with waiting times of months, exorbitant import costs, and the ever-present threat of trade sanctions blocking shipment. In addition, the metrics for the parts are different. The screws are millimetric, but of a different standard. The bearings are of an unusual specification. Even the thread on the oil cap is different. Third, reliability out of context. These trucks are legendary for their toughness on the Russian steppes, but that toughness is based on brutal simplicity and tolerance for large clearances. In a Western environment, where precision, consistent performance, and integration with digital logistics systems are expected, they are like a bull in a china shop. They consume fuel at a terrifying rate, are very slow, and their cab is torture on long trips. Buying a Russian truck outside its habitat is buying a monumental problem, a machine that will never be completely legal, never be completely reliable, and will isolate you from all the support infrastructure that gives life to a transportation company. It's a brick wall that will hit you in the face every day. Number 4. Certain Caterpillar highway engine models, problematic C15 assert. Here, the tragedy has a revered name, Caterpillar. For decades, the red oval ring on the side of the engine was a seal of unbreakable quality, infinite torque, and million-mile durability. Then came the assert, advanced catalytic emission technology era, and specifically, some C15 assert engines from the mid-2000s. This is not a problem with one truck. It is a problem with a legendary engine that had a birth defect. A defect so expensive to repair that it has condemned otherwise perfectly healthy trucks to the scrapyard. The problem centers on the cylinder heads. Designed to withstand the extreme pressures and temperatures of assert emissions technology, some of these heads had microcracks or casting defects. Over time and with use, these cracks spread. The symptom is coolant and oil mixing, loss of compression, and eventually catastrophic failure. Repair is not a simple gasket job. It requires complete disassembly of the top end of the engine, replacement of the defective heads, which cost a fortune in themselves, and often block reconditioning. The skilled labor for this work on a C15 engine is astronomical. The total bill for this repair can easily range from $25,000 to $35,000. And this is the apocalyptic dilemma. Many of the trucks that were fitted with these engines, old Kenworth T800s Peterbilt 379s, may be worth between $40,000 and $60,000 on the current market. What owner in their right mind would invest $30,000 to repair an engine in a truck worth $50,000? The answer is no one. When the engine fails, these trucks are sold for parts or sent directly to the scrapyard. The spectre of the problematic C15 assert has created a market of terror. Buying a truck from that era without a comprehensive and documented service history of the condition of the heads is like playing Russian roulette with a bullet in every chamber. It is inheriting a time bomb whose ticking is measured in dollars per minute and whose explosion means the total loss of the investment. Number 3. The GNAF brand. GNAF is not a truck manufacturer, it is a tank manufacturer with a truck license. Born in the Netherlands, its raison d'etre is to build hyper-specialized vehicles for the most extreme applications on the planet: wind turbine transport, vehicles for the oil industry in the Arctic, trucks for open-pit mines. A GNAF is an engineering masterpiece with proprietary axles, hydropneumatic suspension systems, alloy steel frames, and extremely powerful engines. And it is, without a doubt, the worst truck you can buy for anything other than its original specific application. Taking a GNAF on the normal road is like wearing an astronaut suit to go buy bread. Everything about it is optimized for extreme endurance, not efficiency, comfort or cost. Fuel consumption is monstrous because you're pushing around a huge mass with brick-like aerodynamics. The tires are special, low profile and stratospherically priced. The suspension, wonderful for absorbing half-meter rocks, is uncomfortable and reactive on a highway. But the real black hole is maintenance. There is no corner garage for a GNAF. Every repair requires specialized technicians, specific tools, and of course, spare parts that are only manufactured by GNAF in the Netherlands. A routine service costs as much as a major repair on a normal truck. A breakdown in the complex hydropneumatic system can cost more than a second-hand truck of a conventional brand is worth. It is a vehicle designed so that the cost of operation is a secondary detail in a project worth hundreds of millions. In the hands of an owner-operator or a small fleet, it is a financial cancer. It is the epitome of a white elephant, an asset with dazzling capabilities that, in the wrong context, consumes you alive with expenses until there is nothing left. Buying a GNAF without a $1 million contract to justify its existence is the definition of business madness. Number 2. The trucks of the Navistar MaxForce era. In the early 2000s, Navistar International made a bold and, in hindsight, disastrous strategic decision. It decided to develop its own family of advanced emissions diesel engines, the MaxForce, to end its dependence on suppliers such as Cummins. The MaxForce 11 and 13 engines, which powered thousands of International ProStar and Lone Star trucks, quickly became synonymous with the worst engineering failure in modern North American transportation history. The problems were numerous and systemic. The design of the exhaust gas recirculation (EGR) system was inherently problematic, leading to massive carbonization, valve failures, and uncontrolled oil consumption. The after-treatment systems failed constantly. The engines suffered from power loss, stalling in the middle of the road, and ridiculously short service life. Fleets saw these new trucks spending more time in the shop than on the road. Navistar tried to patch the problem with software updates and revisions, but the defect was fundamental to the design. The result was a flood of class action lawsuits, a loss of customer confidence from which Navistar has never fully recovered, and a poisoned used market. Buying a MaxForce-era International ProStar is like buying a lottery ticket where the only prize is a $20,000 repair bill for an engine rebuild. These trucks carry such a deep stigma that their residual value is virtually zero. They are the vengeful ghosts of a bad corporate decision, and they have financially ruined hundreds of owner-operators and small fleets. It is the failed experiment that took down the credibility of a century-old brand. To touch them, even if the price seems like a steal, is to touch mechanical leprosy. Number 1. Any truck from the defunct manufacturer Oliver. And we come to the abyss. The number 1 spot is not for a specific model, but for a universal principle of survival in the world of transportation. The worst truck you can buy is anyone whose manufacturer has disappeared from the map without leaving a clear air, a support network, or an archive of blueprints. Brands such as Oliver, Brockway, White in its final demise, or Diamond Rio in America, or Seddon Atkinson, ERF in certain contexts in Europe. These are not brands discontinued by a megacorporation that still exists, such as Sterling. They are dead and buried brands, whose assets were liquidated and whose designs were lost in the mists of time. Buying a truck from such a brand is like buying a fossil. It is acquiring an object that no longer has a place in the global ecosystem. There is no manufacturer, there is no parts department. There are no engineers to call. There are no specialized scrapyards because it has not been manufactured for 30 years. Every component, from the smallest bolt to the largest cab panel, is a relic. If it breaks, it cannot be repaired. It must be reinvented at a cost that bears no relation to reality. These trucks are monuments to uselessness. They may be immaculate, they may have an engine that still runs, but their practical value is zero. They are traps of nostalgia. A naive person might see a well-preserved Oliver and think, what a beauty, what an opportunity. An expert sees a coffin on wheels. It is not a vehicle, it is a liability. It cannot be operated for fear of breaking it. It cannot be sold because there is no rational buyer, and it cannot be given away because it would be a curse on the recipient. It is total bankruptcy made manifest. It represents an absolute investment with no possibility of return, pure loss. Because it embodies the definitive death of any possibility of support, utility and value, any truck from an extinct brand with no support network takes, with all the harshness of the case, the top spot on this list of things you should never buy. It is the final lesson. In transportation, you don't buy a truck, you buy access to a living support system. And if that system died decades ago, what you take home is not an asset, it is a very heavy corpse.